I want to thank you for inviting me here today to speak about my life experience and my story. And I'd like to invite you to come with me on a journey and explore the reaches of societal myths and what one experiences when you confront such myths. How many of you have heard of the Dark Ages, and that prior to Columbus and Magellan, that a majority of the individuals in Europe during those periods were convinced that the earth was flat? Okay. Roughly about half. Okay. Roughly. The flat earth myth has been propagated since the early 1830s and has been disproved by numerous writings since the late 1990s. Yet today that myth continues, and people all throughout the U.S. use it as an example of a fact that in reality is nothing more than a fairy tale that was designed for children to teach about Columbus. Inaccurate beliefs are difficult to change, especially when they are firmly held societal beliefs that are spoken and reinforced every day. Here are a few that we've been working on for a while in our country. Women are inferior to men. Skin color can be an indicator of education, work capabilities, or morality. Here's another one. War is the only way to provide safety to a country. These are all myths, and we've tried to dispel them for a very, very long time. But there's another myth. That's the binary gender system of male and female, and it's propagated by society today. We like to wrap gender up in a nice, neat package, tie a pink or blue bow on it, and declare the concept is solved. If I were to utilize the planets as an example of gender, I could pick two spheres called Mars and Venus based on a popular book. How many of you have read that book? Okay, we got a few. Good. But that leaves me in a quandary as to who I am. For a long time, I attempted to stay within the rigid confines of a societally based definition of gender. The reality is, I'm neither from Mars nor am I from Venus. Books like Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus try to show the binary differences. They don't show the vast flavors of the gender spectrum at all. Imagine, if you would, that gender's a taste. That it was something you could put your fingers on, scoop out a little piece, and taste it. Would two flavors be enough for you? I would think Baskin-Robbins and Dairy Queen would be out of business fairly rapidly. My life is something like the flat earth myth, spun from the web of the societal myth of just two flavors of a gender. And my story begins in a very small town, which was about 250 families out in the middle of the Arizona desert. It was called Silver Bell, Arizona. It was very remote, and it was a copper mining community. I was given the unique gift by the universe to be born into a strict, right-wing fundamentalist family. Sometimes I seriously have to wonder if the universe has anything called humor at all. My DNA family lives under the iron rule of law from a congregation called the Church of Christ. Now, that's not our friends who are the United Churches of Christ who like us. Okay? This is the not-so-like-us church. They live by the letter of the law, and it's much more important than loving a person or recognizing an individual. They're Bible literalists that demand obedience to the exact phrasing of what they perceive are black and white laws and constructs of biblical scripture. Some of the teachings, for example, we were not allowed to have musical instruments in the church at all. Everything was sung a cappella because there's no verse that has an instrument in it in the New Testament. So therefore, Jesus condemned all instruments. I don't know how that works. We were taught that women weren't to lead, they weren't to have a voice in the congregation, they were to obey their husbands, and that was regardless of the abuse or torment that was, put upon them. We were also taught the realities of a fire and brimstone hell. My grandfather was a lay minister who taught nothing but revelations. That's all he taught. He was thrown out of a bunch of congregations, and rightly so. Imagine, if you will, a little transsexual child born into this environment, an environment where everything was coached in terms of right and wrong, and no gray was permitted. A world where disobedience to the laws of rights and wrongs were met with swift corporal punishment. That's where I grew up at. The first betrayal I can remember was an evening when I engaged my identity and I came out to my family. I was about age 5 or 6. And I appeared to my family in a blouse that I'd went to the bathroom, put on my makeup, and put on my mother's blouse, which went all the way to my knees. I wasn't that tall then. My mother was completely horrified. She grabbed me, threw me into the bathroom, scrubbed off my face, and chastised me. Never do that evil thing again in this household. Very, very angry. I was very aware right at that moment that what was deep inside of me was considered a very great evil. I knew that if I were allowed to be free, even for a moment, of who I was, that I would be spending eternity in torment, and I'd be separated from everybody I loved. Imagine at 5 years old, knowing that you were so horrible and evil, that without fighting and winning to suppress who you are, you'd be punished and abandoned forever. It's a very cruel thing for a parent to do. In my view, it's brainwashing of a child. And it had some real serious ramifications for me. Last year, 2 really close friends of mine did a reenactment of the scene of my mother's reaction. I sat stunned in silence and in tears. I kind of relived that moment, and at the same time I realized really how truly detrimental that little 10-minute window in my life was. Her insanity at grabbing me up was so traumatic, it's never left my memory. The friends who did the reenactment gave me a great gift. It really healed some things, and I was really happy that we were able to do that. But again, I had learned, just in those few minutes, the horror that others would feel, or I asserted they would feel, if I came out to who I was. I learned that to survive, I had to hide who I was, and I allowed other people to place masks of societal expectations over the top of me, or cloaks. And it was out of fear and torment. And that very day I began betraying myself and living the lie that other people created for me so that they could feel comfortable. It wasn't about me. It was their comfort that was in question. As a young child of 8, I remember praying for moments to a deaf and mute deity to take away the evil that had been imposed on me. I begged and pleaded for it to be taken away and my true self to be allowed to be free from the prison of the body. I asked to be changed miraculously, and I was really met with cold silence and despair. And I would try to purge. I would say, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. Or that I don't have enough faith. My agony led me down a lot of dark paths, suicidal ideation at the age of probably around 8 to 10 forward. And most of my life, I've had suicidal ideation. I waited for the change. I was thinking, hoping that maybe in puberty those changes would begin as they did for my sister. Maybe my body will change then. It didn't. I kept getting taller. I waited and ultimately watched as the testosterone poisoned my body and stole my form from me, destroyed my voice, my tissue, and altered my brain chemistry as much as it could. I was really horribly embarrassed when people would say, "Oh, look how manly you've become." I was really upset and embarrassed. And my body was just being ravaged. I watched my skin get hard and growing facial hair. It was really kind of a horror. My sisters had some clothes that I would sometimes sneak into when I was alone. So I'd go and pick out this, that, or the other. And I put on makeup and my mother's blouse, some high heels, and prance around the house, especially when nobody was there, if I could get away with it. However, I think my mother knew I was dressing up because I don't think a 10-year-old can really clean up that much liquid makeup off the bathroom counters. But nothing was ever said to me. So I kept this stash of clothes. And by the way, I had a shopping center. My shopping center was the clotheslines of 250 families as I rode my bike around. It was a great store, but the sizings were a little off. So I would take these clothes and I would stick them under my mattress, thinking that was the best place to hide clothing. And I had acquired, different things over that time. And so I was sent to Bible camp, to become godly and become this man that I was supposed to be. And my mother decided to flip the mattress while I was at Bible camp. So she flipped the mattress. I was at camp, luckily, so I didn't get like that initial burst of whatever happened to have, came out. But I got back, and she exploded on me. And she grabbed me, and she goes, "We're going to go see the pediatrician." Because the pediatrician is always the answer to everything you have going on in those days. My pediatrician was like, "Are you sick? What's wrong with you? Do you like little boys?" And they went through this whole litany of questions. And, I denied everything. I was just hiding it for whatever reason. Deep in my heart, I knew something was wrong at that point. I had been taken to a doctor because something was wrong. And my mother wanted the doctor to cure it. Of course, the doctor didn't know what to do with it. He was a gentle man, and he didn't tell my mother of the conversations, but it was still, I didn't trust anybody at that point. So nobody knew. Nobody knew. But deep in my heart, at that point, I knew something was wrong, and it strengthened my conviction that I was a sinful pervert and a horrific sinner due to what was happening. My feminine expressions only created more confusion inside myself and others. I would sit and try to force my hands to flow in a certain way and look manly. So, I practiced this manly look in front of the mirror. And I wanted to ensure that my feminine expressions didn't come out to anybody, because if they did, then I got bullied and I got hurt. I can still remember even up to a few years ago where I was constantly looking at my hands in staff meetings or in places of employment or in public speaking engagements, and I would keep my hands very rigidly held or in a certain pose or, down by my sides, all these kinds of things. I did that every day for 45 years. It's a lot of mental pressure when you're trying to conform to push out an act or an identity that you aren't. Many times when being myself, I would slip and relax into my true gender expression. And I'd get pounced on by the bullies or chased or slammed into the lockers. Most perceived me as gay, which I was not. It was an assumption that many had made. And I spent many years in the schools in horror and fear and tears, really suffering from the bullies and their ugly hatred of my life. I still bear those scars today, and I'll continue to bear those scars. It's just part of the life that's mine to own. My mom was so fearful in her beliefs that I was going to hell that she came up with the magic formula. How many of you have ever had a magic formula for something to solve a problem? A couple. My mother decided that I was going to go to a good Christian university, meet a good Christian wife who was going to save me from myself being a pervert. So she sent me to Abilene Christian University in Texas. It was the most fundamental Church of Christ college at the time that she could find. And she continually, for about 4 or 5 years, it was, you're going to go to a good Christian university, find a good Christian wife, and she's going to save you. And this was like the mantra of my living for several years in high school. And I don't think she understood that those suggestions, that continual suggestion, was going to be acted upon as quickly as possible to save myself. So I don't think she knew the catastrophe that she was really setting up. So I went to Abilene. The second semester I met someone, and 10 days later I married her. Yeah, that was a little much. That marriage lasted 6.5 years, and I have 3 children from that marriage. I cross-dressed the entire marriage. And my wife, who was the good Christian wife at the time, she had what she wanted, so she didn't say anything about it until the divorce, of course. And then it was the pervert. The marriage was my first attempt at cloaking my identity. I subsequently tried that 2 more times. I've been married 3 times. In fact, February 2nd would have been 30 years of marriage for me. I've had 3 divorces. The last one ended in that I have 2 younger children, and I lost visitation with the children, and I've lost parental rights basically with the children through the courts. That only happened in September, so I'm still kind of working through that. Today I'm on my guard in a different way. I watch those around me to ensure my safety. It's a constant vigil that demands my attention, as I never know where aggression or an assault may come from. Whether it's standing on a train platform, as the young lady, she was standing on a bus platform going to see friends. She never knew anything was coming at her. Whether it's walking down the hall of an office, I'm always on guard. I'm aware of what's behind me and what's around me, because there's just simply too much of a chance, which is almost 400 times the chance of anybody else of getting assaulted. Makes for a little bit of stress. Let me give you an example of how some individuals out there act towards me, because I think it's helpful. I recently went into a shopping center to buy some groceries, and the woman at the counter continued to use male pronouns to address me. I don't think my appearance suggests masculinity on any level. My voice probably does, but not my appearance. My purse, my dress, my skirt, heels, earrings, makeup, they were all simply ignored. This was her attempt at casting a social gender bias over my existence. What she attempted to do was force a gender conformity, a societal gender conformity, over the reality that was actually standing before her. She does that because she's trying to maintain the myth that she believes. She's terrified at the thought of something different other than a binary gender. And her denial proves her the illusion of comfort and security. So it gives her something by refusing to accept what's in front of her. That causes a lot of pain for people. To not recognize who they are as an individual is an assault on the person. My journey's taken me through a lot of great losses, pain, some discoveries, some unexpected threats, some fantastic new relationships, some realizations, some really fun celebrations and victories. And my journey follows a path that few will ever travel. It's got great rewards for me, personally. It's still a process, though. And it's a process that will be for quite a while to come. I don't think society is going to be changing anytime in the next 30 days or 5 years. If we're still struggling from issues 50, 60, 70 years old, this is fairly new on the plate of society. So I'm going to leave you with a cliffhanger. And I'd like to encourage you to come to this afternoon's workshop. I'm going to talk a little more in the workshop about how I came to decide to stop living the lie of what happened with the marriage, how my in-laws treated me, how my children reacted. They're They're now 10 and 13. I'm going to speak about two really kind UU psychologists that introduced me to the UU, which you are the most silent congregations I've ever heard of. Yeah, I don't know that there's much more silent people than a Unitarian Universalist out there. It's pretty difficult. Silent in telling who you are. Now, the issues we have, social justice-wise, were really loud. But they introduced me to UU down at the Jersey, South Jersey shore. And I found a community that really embraced me, allowed me to have my dignity, and they supported my need to find my authentic self when my world had absolutely exploded around me. So the question remains, where am I from? Am I from Mars? Am I from Venus? My answer is simple. I'm from the third rock from the sun. I'm from Earth. And I'm part of you. I'm part of who you are as well. I'm not much different than anybody else. I cry, I eat, I drive, I avoid getting hit. But I'm just like you guys are. And I really appreciate you letting me share part of my story with you today. And I hope that this congregation, as it grows in the welcoming world, will start to meet more of us and understand we're very unique people. We've got experiences that are unique that I think a lot of people could learn from. We're also really insane while we do this. The hormone changes really do some things. So I would like to invite you to the workshop after. And I want to thank you again for letting me come and speak with you.